Hey everyone, it's Des and Marco with After School with the Admins. Thank you for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, share with a friend. Here's our newest episode.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of After School with the Admins. I'm your host, Marco Torillo, and I'm here with my co-host,
Des Caldwell, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Well, we have another special episode today. We are joined by the Assistant Principal of the Year for high schools in New York, Dr. Scott Muller. Mr. Muller, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for the invite.
We're really excited to get a chance to talk to you and get a chance to hear about the great things that you are doing for your school and all your experience through education. So what we like to always do is we like to start off our podcast episodes with asking the guests the question of what was their educational journey? What made you want to become a teacher, and then what made you move into where you are today and then have this passion for education?
Sure. So I remember as a kid, my grandfather was a head custodian in elementary school. And he brought some of the old books home and an old chalkboard. And we used to play school down in the basement of his house, which is actually my house now. I live in his house now. We had fun, right? And so I loved school. I did well in school. That could be a drawback or a benefit to an educator, because obviously if you do well in a system that exists, you think that that's the system that should exist. And sometimes, we need to accommodate those kids that are not necessarily geared towards the way we do education. But that said, so I always liked school. And when I got to about ninth grade, I took biology and I fell in love with biology. I was going to be a chef previous to that, decided to do biology. I was going to be a doctor, a medical doctor. So I went through all my 4 years of high school thinking I was going to be a doctor. I then attended Binghamton University in New York, pre-med. I got my bachelor's of science in biology. Between my junior and senior year at Binghamton, I volunteered in the emergency room at Stony Brook University Hospital on Long Island. And I saw medicine for what it was, and I did not like what I saw. So now I was like, what do I do? And I always thought I would enjoy teaching. And so I wasn't too sure. So I decided to go to Australia for a year, because that's what you do when you don't know what you want to do. I came back. I thought maybe I wanted to fly helicopters in the Coast Guard. So I went down to Battery Park, New York City, and talked to a Coast Guard recruiter because I thought that would be neat. But then I said, you know what? I really think I want to teach. I think it would be a lot of fun. And I decided to go to school. And I got my master's in elementary education. Now, my goal was always to teach at the high school level, and I wanted to teach biology. But I worked at a deli at the time, and there were educators that I spoke to, and they recommended that I get my master's in elementary, and then I could do my student teaching at the secondary level. And the reason I could do that is that way I would be certified K through 12. And, in the future, if I ever wanted to teach or be an administrator at the elementary level, at least it would give me some credibility. So I did that. I got my master's in elementary education. I then started teaching biology. And I taught for 3 years before starting the professional diploma program at Stony Brook University. And that was a 3-year program. And then once I graduated from that program, I began as an administrator where I currently am at Walt Whitman High School. And as I describe my journey, I tell the story to the kids at my school. We have a freshman leadership group that I've spoken to about my journey. And the reason I tell them my journey is to give them permission to not necessarily know what they want to do with their lives, right? Because so many times as administrators and teachers and parents, we're like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do? And it's not necessarily going in one direction. Well, it is always going in a direction of improvement and learning, but you can change your mind throughout that journey. And that's really important for our kids to know that, because that's what many of our journeys are. And I know that on previous podcasts, you have a lot of people who come on your podcasts that weren't originally destined for education, but somehow it kind of finds you, right? And I can't imagine doing anything else than education. I still look back on, if I was a medical doctor, what would my life be like? And I think I would have been a pretty darn good doctor. But when I spoke to one of my friends who is a doctor, and I said, "Oh, but I like educating," he goes, "Well, that's what doctors do, isn't it? Or at least they're supposed to, because as a doctor, you're supposed to educate your patient." But I have no regrets. I'm glad I'm in the educational field. So that's pretty much how I got to education.
That's quite an interesting story. I was actually going to say, like, so your actual doctorate is not in education.
It is. So I got, after I got my professional diploma, then I got my doctorate in educational leadership from St. John's University.
Okay. That's what I just want to make sure. For one, that we're listening to the story, I'm like, wait a minute. So you went and became a full doctor and then did an about face and went to a totally other degree, which is still fascinating to me in every way whatsoever. I love the fact of that. That's your story, because I think that's so cool. The fact that you went through an entire medical profession and then made the decision that, you know what, this isn't really meant for me, which has got to be a hard thing to do, because we know the time that it takes to go through that and do. But at the same time, you always had that feeling when it came to education and realized this might be the place for me. And look where you are now.
Yeah, well, I didn't go to medical school, thank goodness, but I did the pre-med track at Binghamton, right? So it definitely was a more challenging program to go through. And it allowed me then to teach biology, right? And when I was the first year teaching, actually, if I have to be honest, I started to say, ooh, do I want to go to medical school still? Because there still was something pulling me to medicine. Mm-hmm. And then as the year progressed, I'm like, nope. This is where I belong, because it was just way too much fun. It's just way too much fun.
Do you care to elaborate a little bit on when you say saw medicine for what it was? Certainly, we don't want to disrespect the medical profession, but that I'm really interested in your thinking with that phrase.
So it's insurance. Mm. I couldn't practice medicine. I would not have been able to practice medicine how philosophically I believe we should be able to practice. And I think that in our country, we do a disservice to patients because we don't look at the whole patient. It's just an assembly line medicine, get them in, get them out, get them a drug, and move on. Where I think, well, I know we have to look at the whole person, right? And so I think that like dissonance between what I wanted and what was going to happen would have been really disturbing to me. Now, obviously in education, we have that too, right?
Yeah, I was going there.
I mean, think about it. There are things that we want to do, but we can't because of regulations or money or whatever it may be. But I know that, or I think that that's more manageable in the educational field for me personally versus in the medical field, that I can handle it.
Well, almost you think about it in our field where your friend said, we're supposed to teach as a doctor, you are teaching your patient like about themselves. I think in our field, we're teaching, but we're teaching them to make their own decision of where they're going to go with the knowledge they're getting. I think when I think of that medical statement that you had there, it's that statement of like, we are telling you this is what you should be doing because this is what it's going to do for you. Here, we give all sides of the information, and then it's like you've got to make your own decision from what we're giving you here. We hope that's what people do. They're supposed to. Yes, I will say it that way. We are supposed to.
There are a lot of people that are that are doing a whole lot of things because they don't believe that's what we're doing, right?
True.
Absolutely.
I'll give you that one. Yes, I do agree with that. That's what we are supposed to do in our profession.
And unfortunately, in our profession, I have found that so many people, because they've gone through school, think that they know what school is all about, right? I went to school, so I know what school works like. So I've been at my school for 20 years. And so I see a lot of people who went through school now, they come back and they're either student teaching or they're teachers, or sometimes they're parents, which is kind of disturbing because I'm getting old. But I asked them, the first thing I asked them is, so compared to the way you thought it was going to be, what are some differences, right? And they always express they didn't know how hard it was going to be. And that's good, because I say, then we did our job, because we're supposed to not show you how hard our jobs are. We're supposed to give you the best experience possible. You know, being an educator or a secretary or a custodian or whatever at a school, we are in the customer service industry. And I don't think some educators think about it that way, but we need to provide a high level of service to the people we serve. And that's the community, that's the kids, that's the parents. And then as administrators, of course, it's the teachers, it's everybody else in the building. So, you know, that's our role, and that's what we need to do. But people don't understand how hard it is. And because there's so many factors, right? There's like you want to, I always go, we have one of the other APs, it's her third year. And the biggest lesson for her was how complicated it is. So for example, you do an assembly, you schedule an assembly, right? Oh, you just schedule an assembly and you just tell the teachers. Well, no, you have to book the assembly. You have to, did you remember to reserve? Oh, how are you going to track the attendance for the kids if the assembly goes into another period? And all of these other things. Oh, if it goes during a lunch period, how are you going to accommodate the lunch period? And all of a sudden you look at it and you're like, wow, I thought it was simple. No, it's not.
Right. How much notice are you giving people? Because the whole lot of people are going to be upset because they planned for that time to be used differently, and you just made enemies, right? By the end of it, you're like, you know what? I'm just going to send an email.
So true. So true.
To go to your statement that you're making about like how much work it is, it's the equivalent of that duck on water. We all look like we're just gliding across, but underneath those feet are flying like there's no tomorrow to stay above that water and stay moving and grooving. And that's education in a nutshell. We have to make it look effortless, which many people think we do, but at the same time, we are working like there's no tomorrow, determining on whatever task you've got to get done to make it, to show it to that point, to have that feeling for everyone else that, oh, that was great. It's like, yeah, it was great for you. For us, it was a lot of work getting it done, but at the same time, it's satisfying when you get it done and it all turns out perfect the way you were hoping.
Well, I have a friend who worked the same hours as me. Let's say she worked many, many days. She would work from 6 a.m. to 8 o'clock at night. And she hated her job, right? And I'm like, you need to quit because it's not worth it, because you're doing all of this work to make somebody money. We don't work to make somebody money. We work to make a difference. And I really believe that. It's so cliche, right? But it's true. And we don't just make a difference in the kid. We make a difference in their entire family, right? And then I adopted my son. He's 17 now. He came home when he was 10. Special needs. He went into a special placement when he first came home. He had to be restrained by staff members multiple times a week because they're trying to bite them and kick them. And now he's in a regular school. We did the hard work. But where was I going with this story? Oh, because now as a parent, I value it even more sending him to school, knowing that those people care about him. Not that they're good teachers. Yeah, they're good teachers. Great. He'll learn some math. He'll learn some science, but that they care about him. They see him. They want him to grow. They want to nurture him. And you see how important our jobs are for so many people. And now when you talk about the amount of mental illness in our kids, right? And it's growing for various reasons. That's a whole nother podcast, right? But they need us more than ever to connect them to resources and to be there for them through those trying times, you know?
Honestly, you hit two things that we've mentioned about in past podcasts. One, the fact that our job is more than just the teaching aspect, which you see a lot. You know what I mean? Like people think outside, like, oh, you work from, 8 to 2:30 or whatever that time period is, and you go home and you have summers off. I'm like, that's not even close to what we do. But on top of that, also, we are the ones who deal with every waking moment of that child, trying to work, as you said, the whole child. We want to make sure they are social emotionally okay. We're helping them to regulate. We're helping them to learn how to handle situations. We're helping them to actually understand the materials, how to persevere when things are getting rough, how to teach them to be able to handle rough things and get into that productive struggle. We go through all those components with kids. And then the second part being the fact that you said, we are changing people. Like, we have a lasting experience. And, I've had this conversation with family members and actually other individuals. I remember I was at a gym with another person, and the guy who was running the class was talking about how he's looking for a new job. He's working as a paraprofessional, and he was thinking of becoming a teacher. But at the same time, he was now looking to go work in an insurance company just because it makes better money, which understood. But I said to him, one thing I said, that's great. And I understand the reason why. I get it. But at the same time, when you're all said and done, can you say that you did something with your life during that time period? Like, to be real, like, I get it. You work, you'll do all that. And I'm not saying that's not there. It's not saying it won't be fulfilling for you, the money you'll make and stuff. But when you finish 20 years as a teacher or 30 years or 35 years as a teacher, whatever your time period you make your choice to leave profession, you've made an impact, better or worse. Because, really, it's either way it can sometimes be. But your time in that school impacted individuals across. You caused a ripple effect. And you don't usually find out right away about it. It's usually like a couple of years down the road, someone runs into you at Stop and Shop and decides to tell you about what you did for them. Or, a kid that you helped comes back and tells you when they're going into education next. It's those moments that you get that you can't get anywhere else. And that's just something I always think about with this job. Like, yeah, it's got its hard days, but it's got its great days too. And you find those moments where you're just like, this is why we do it. This is why we do what we do.
Sometimes I tell people when they say, do you like your job? I'm like, don't ask me while I'm at the school.
Yeah.
Because at noon on a Thursday, I'm going to say, why the heck am I doing this? And then I wish I said 3 o'clock, at 4:30, 5 o'clock on a good day, right? When I'm driving home in my car, I go, gosh, I love my job, right? Because when you're in it, it's tough. I guess it's like running a marathon. I ran 2 marathons. When I'm running it, I'm like, this is hurting me. This is tough. But when you're done, you're like, I've accomplished great things. My fear is that I see this shift where a lot of people are talking about not going into education. A lot of the teachers are recommending to their children, do not become a teacher. Now, in New York State, they've changed the retirement age from 55 to 63. That makes a big difference. You're talking about a lot more time to have to teach before retirement. They've also changed some other things that affect salaries and things. But overall, there's this thought that because education's under attack and there's so much accountability now that it's not worth it. And that scares me because I'm hoping that really good educators are not being directed out of the profession, because right now, more than ever, we need the most compassionate, patient educators ever.
So I'm going to say I look at that a little bit differently. And this is just probably my eternal optimist inside of me. I feel like we're weeding out the individuals who think this job's going to be easy. The ones that will be there, that'll do the job, but will go home. I feel and this is just, again, my hope, and Des can probably roll his eyes at me on this one if he wants to for it when it comes to my thought process with it, and I'm fine with it.
Oh, they're rolling, but go ahead.
I gotta hope what we've talked about a number of times on this podcast, those individuals who are meant for it will still get there. Might take their paths, but they're still gonna get there. Whether it is there's requirement changes and things like that, I'm still gonna have that hope and that dream on that side of it. Because it's got it. I just feel that it's one of those, it's still that calling for a lot of people. And now, Des, shoot me down.
Yeah. I unfortunately believe we are rapidly racing toward dehumanizing the educational experience. I think we are rapidly racing toward and some sort of AI experience that is not going to afford us to continue to have the best and the brightest standing in front of our students. And I mean, I think we're going to long for the days where there were 30 kids in front of us because that was intimate. And the reason I say that is we are in the midst of an exodus from teaching in particular. And, social media isn't everything, but it's a lot of things right now, right? And just looking at things like I'm not coming back from winter break trend, right? And people almost joyfully talking about how, you know what, we don't have to come back. We can quit right now. People cleaning out their classrooms and, people virtually high-fiving them like, oh my goodness, I can't wait till I'm doing that. Like, there are a lot of young people who became teachers for whatever reason. And Marco, you may be absolutely right that they were not cut out for it. And they are being weeded out. And they shouldn't have been in front of students. That may be true for some, it may be true for a lot. But for whatever reason, and I think a lot of people look at us as administrators as not being able to support them in the ways they needed to be supported. I think they're looking at a lot of different reasons, but I think that's one of them. And they're leaving. And we're going to replace them with long-term substitutes who are less qualified. And so I fear that we continue to lose people, but we are not gaining people at the same rate, right? And so then what happens when and you and I worked in schools, and Scott, I imagine you probably have as well, where kids went through, say, an entire middle school experience, and they did not have a licensed science teacher. They did not have a licensed math teacher in those classrooms. They may have been required to take a world language, and they didn't have a licensed world language teacher throughout the process. And so their experience has been that they don't have these licensed folks, so their education has been less than it could have been. And yes, there were people hired initially that didn't make it, so they didn't finish the school year. But then who finishes the school year with that child or with those children? And what is the cost for them? And then we see them at the high school level when they show up in ninth grade, and they have missed so much of that preparation. And then we're asking our teachers to take them from, maybe having had 1 year of high quality instruction in middle school, and we got to get this kid through these high school level classes. And we're trying to push them as hard as we can so that they are entering the world ready and prepared. And I know that's not everyone's situation, but that is happening so often. And so I worry about people not coming back. I worry about saying anything that would encourage people to not stick it out. And we do have to try to make it a little easier for them, though, I don't think I don't think we're there yet, but it's something that we're constantly working on. In fact, that's one of the reasons that I think we have this podcast is because we are, as administrators, saying, hey, let's get together and let's talk about the things you're doing that are successful so we can do those things as well. I'm sorry, I went on for longer than I intended.
I mean, as far as the AI taking over education, I don't see it. And because what we just talked about is the most important part of education are the relationships, are addressing the motivation of kids, the mental illness of kids, whatever it may be. It's not about the content. I always tell my kids, listen, I was a biology teacher. So I always say, I was a biology teacher, so let's use biology. If you don't know what a mitochondria is in 20 years, even if you're a medical doctor, if you don't remember what that is, chances are it won't affect your life. But what you learned, the social skills, the managing skills, the study skills, the whatever skills, the life skills that you learn through the process of going to school is the most important. And I think that a lot of people who are not in education don't realize that, right? Just read a book. But that's not what it's about. This is why we have the crisis we have in our country, because the kids, instead of talking to each other, are on their phones and they don't know how to deal with each other and talk to each other. And that's going to lead to long-term outcomes. So God forbid that we decide to do school a different way where they don't come to school and socialize. That'll be the collapse of the culture as we know, I think.
And we experienced that for a year and a half during COVID, right? How many years did it take I think we're all feeling like we're just getting back to students being able to socialize with each other and not feel like they're sitting in a classroom, but they're on a, Call of Duty headset talking to each other the way, like, the way kids were talking to each other for a while was like, are we serious? Like, what and how do you communicate with each other that way? But like they had forgotten, and it was a very short period of time. I mean, it felt like a long period of time, but we're talking a year and a half, and it completely destabilized, I think, social interaction amongst, I mean, maybe adults too, but definitely kids. And so I do worry. I don't know that it would be a situation where kids would not have the social interaction in the school setting. I worry what that looks like. Like I really worry about if there were a way to put 60 middle schoolers in a classroom with a lesson and everyone else is just monitoring the student's behavior while the lesson goes. And that's what I mean, because I've had situations where I've had so many teachers call out for whatever reason, right? Where I've had to cover classes in the auditorium, and I've been in the auditorium with 3-4 classes doing all right, so-and-so's English class, you're working on this, get started, whatever, so-and-so's science class, you're working on this, and then doing the running back and forth and just, making sure everyone's being safe and, trying to use Hapara or whatever to look at their screens and make sure. But when you got that many kids, that's a lot of tabs to be open on your computer to try to follow. And that's the kind of thing that I worry about, that if we don't have the bodies in the building, if people are leaving, then we either bring in people who literally are just there to supervise kids, even if it's still, 25 to 30 kids in the classroom, but they don't have the subject matter knowledge. They are there to supervise children, and something else is doing the teaching. And that's what I mean when I say AI. And I feel like there are situations where we're starting to see that in some places.
So we all agree that education's in a good place. We got it.
Right, I just doomsdayed everything. Sorry.
Teachers are fine. We're fine. Everything is fine. Thank you, everybody.
Don't worry.
Come back.
The Federal Department of Education will take care of everything.
They always do.
Hey, we somehow keep going. That's the way I keep looking at it. I'm going to still hold on to my internal optimism after all that of we'll find those teachers and we'll continue to keep showing them in the greatness that they are. Well,
oh, God.
thinking about we're talking about staff and keeping staff and having people want to be teachers and wanting to be going through. One of the things that you've been quoted, Scott, on talking about before is being known as a person who creates a supportive and collaborative environment in your school. Can you talk to us a little bit about what are some of the things that you do to have that, to make sure that your staff is unified and believing in working with each other and being supportive?
That was made up. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. That's not really made up. No.
All right, we're pivoting. Let's move on.
I figured give you an answer you're not expecting, right? That's a hard question to answer because it kind of just happens, right? But creating a collaborative environment. So I have been at my school for 20 years, and there's been a lot of changes over that time. And a lot has to do with cultural changes, right, in our building. So it's, well, as simple as boots on the ground to be out there, right? And so for us to be able to be seen in the hallways constantly, being in the cafeterias, being available via email all the time, that helps with those individual communication between us and the staff, right? Hiring the right staff that are going to be collaborative. So when you're hiring your staff, asking them questions that can highlight, are they going to be team players? Because we've interviewed some really great candidates or who seem to be great candidates, but there's something that just indicates that they're not going to work together. Or let's say they've had a job previously and they're looking to move to your district, and you get some feedback and like, well, they're a great teacher, but they don't talk to the rest of the department. We're out, right? You will not be an effective teacher unless you collaborate. One person alone doesn't have the answer. I always say to people, like, I always go to so many different people when I'm making a decision because I don't know everything. And plus, I may know the facts, but I've got to get the feedback from somebody else and their perspective. So I'm making the right decision. So like our philosophy is I've worked in other buildings where the principal will have a meeting, let's say, and they'll invite people to come to the meeting. They know those people have they're going to make the same decision as the principal. And that's why they're invited. Well, they don't have the damn meeting. I mean, you didn't have to. If the principals come in, don't have a smoke and mirrors show. And so what we do in our building is, so for example, we have a testing week coming up for state assessments, right? And so the kids are not in school, and so there's proctoring assignments and such. But there's going to be 2 committees during that time that some of the teachers are going to be part of. It's going to be an attendance committee to talk about our attendance policies and how we can benefit them. And then the cell phone ban committee, right? And we're inviting people with different perspectives on purpose. We want the union rep, right? Because they're engaged politically. We want the naysayer because why not hear what they have to say, right? Because maybe they're right. And then we want the people who we'll go along with it, but have really great ideas. Bring different people to the table in that regard. We overshare information with staff. So, just give them information. If an email is sent to the parents, send it to the staff. Know what you're sending out, right? That's collaborative. It seems so simplistic, but why shouldn't the teachers know what you just sent to the parents? And when the parent mentions something, they're like, I didn't know anything about that. Then you look like you don't know what you're doing. Now, bringing the teachers together, I'm a very firm believer in like professional development and doing it during the school day. The problem is, as you said, is that coverage is for teachers, right? And that's the challenge. But when you start to become creative, we have collaborative periods built into the teacher schedule. We can take some of their preps during a week and we can have them getting together to talk. And many times it doesn't have to be, you don't bring in an outside person. You give them a topic to discuss and let them discuss it. Teachers want to talk about instruction. Just give them the time to do it. We have set the master schedule up so ICT teachers have common planning time, which is very important, right? So that way they can literally plan together during the school day. When you have a staff that's really young, it's not that they don't care and they're not going to stay till 4:30. It's that they have to get to their families. They have young kids that they have to take care of. It doesn't mean they don't care. They want to do the work, but you have to give them the opportunity to do so. Then there's fun stuff. Like we sometimes have the staff meet us, and obviously it's voluntary, but we'll go to some kind of restaurant/bar, and each person will get a ticket for quote unquote a coffee. Right? And we call it our coffee out, right? But, they get a drink ticket and they can have a nice drink and they can be together. And what happens is it's amazing. It's simple. Of course, the district doesn't pay for it. We pay for that as an admin, but it doesn't, what does it cost you? $100, $120 each person. You buy somebody a drink, you get a good drink special. And now you have the art teacher talking to the math teachers, talking to, right? And then that's led to now each department, and this is what the teachers came up with, each department runs one of those every month. Now they don't pay for it, but the department runs one, organizes it, and then everybody from the building is invited and they get together and they have a good time, right? And it's just having fun with each other and getting away from the work and just having fun, right? Stepping away, because when we're in the building, you're so stressed. But once you get out, now you start to talk and joke around and you lighten the mood. So that way, when you go back to work, you've built connections, right? And you have to build those connections. We also do, every year we do hallway and door decorating, like near the holidays. And so it's a competition. And so that like the door decorating, the top 3 classes get a bagel breakfast. For the hallway, the teachers can get like a get out of duty for a day coupon. And it seems like, well, okay, that seems a little cheesy, but all of a sudden you have these hallways that are really decorated and looking great. And the teachers are working together and there's this competition, but a really good spirit. And those are things that don't cost a lot, but they build culture, a culture of collaboration, really. And so it's really, in summary, trying to be creative, obviously based upon the culture of your building, trying to get people to have fun together. We have a group of teachers who are in a band together. And so there's like 4 or 5 of them. So they invite staff members, and then staff members go out to the bar on a Friday or Saturday night and watch them. And then again, it's getting together and having fun together. So hopefully that answers some of that question.
It does. You think about both sides of it all, because collaboration and supporting students, supporting staff is not always just about making them feel that you're there, that you're giving them information, that you're trying to have them connect with others. you're doing one of the most valuable parts to it, which doesn't always happen, is the collaboration side of it, allowing them time to talk with each other and figure out components themselves, because that's a big part that not always happens. Whether it's, you're looking at directives from central office that will sometimes tell you, like, this is the type of things that meetings must be done throughout the day, or it's, personal beliefs from administration that they want it to be meeting time should be spent doing X, Y, and Z. That happens. Not every time is it always a ability to go and have a collaborative talk with each other. But then also, like you said, the human side of it all is important too. Having the fun, playing the games. Yeah, it always sounds cheesy, but everyone gets into cheesy. That's the one thing I've always realized. It is that statement of people like, I don't want to do that. And they're usually the same person that's doing it. Is like the first to get involved in the game or in the activity. That's all you need sometimes. And it works. And it's those little things that help to start to build that feeling of togetherness.
Yeah, sometimes it's just they need that lubricant to get them started in the way of
a coffee voucher really helps sometimes. You never know what to happen when you give someone something like that.
But what I was thinking about, Scott, while you were saying that is, the way our days are structured, you have, depending on your team structure, you have time set aside for you to meet with your team. You have time set aside to meet with your department. You have time set aside to likely meet with your leadership team. But there are so many teachers and other staff members in the building that just never have an opportunity to get to know each other. And so you're passing strangers in the hallway all day, and you're probably polite and nodding and saying hello, right? But once you've had that 20-30 minute conversation, whether it's just two people or a large group where you're sitting around and if you're super nerd like me, you're talking Lord of the Rings or Marvel, this, that, whatever, and you've made that connection now, right? Because we use the word relationships, but in addition to relationships, you need those connections as well, right? You need those inside jokes sometimes. And now you're passing each other in the hallway, and now you have that inside joke, that weird quirky saying that from whatever TV show you both happen to like, and now you have a genuine giggle, you have a genuine laugh as you continue to walk down the hall to your classroom or to your duty or wherever. And that there's not a real natural way for that to happen in the building during the workday, and still using time for what we're supposed to be using time for. And so, I appreciate that there are collective efforts to, provide that to everyone in the building, because certainly it helps administrators get to know each other and, the staff as well.
Well, hearing that, not just about you being a person that unifies your staff, you've also helped to cause great success with your students. One of the things that was there, because when you were named New York's Assistant Principal of the Year for high schools, one of the things that was written was about the fact that you were able to increase performance for students on state testing and participation in AP courses. Can you talk a little bit about how you got that success to occur?
Again, it's a cultural shift, right? It started a while ago. Once we got the behavior issues 20 years ago under control, we could focus on academics, right? And then we started having these difficult conversations with teachers, with guidance counselors, with parents, and with students, really, and talking about what are kids capable of, and are we pushing them enough, right? Like right now, we're in the really pushing productive struggle, right? Like what does that look like? And believing in that growth mindset and all, and it just having conversation after conversation after conversation. And a lot of that had to do with, you talk to your guidance counselors, and changing that culture is important because they do the programming, right? So as far as increasing scores, like on Regents exams and stuff, we came up with So it changed a culture of believing that kids can do really well. No matter who they are, no matter what background they come from, it doesn't matter. They can do well. Now, clearly, if you have a kid who's at a level 2, going to a level 5 is great. But if you have a level 5, you don't just stop there, then bring them to a level 7, then bring them to a level 8, so on and so forth. Just make sure we're pushing and we have growth. So we also came up with structures where we have, for example, this AEH, which is academic extra help. So teachers have a collaborative period built in their schedule, and once a quarter, they have these academic extra help sections where kids can be programmed in there, or kids could just go down for extra help. And those are during lunch periods. So kids can get that support during lunch periods. And kids who are struggling, we can put them into those places. We also have academic intervention service classes which help prepare students for the Regents exams, really with a focus on the state assessments. We do Regents review and AP reviews before the tests. So teachers are paid, district office pays, and we have review sessions after school. And some of these review sessions, even not the APs, of course, that's anticipated to be packed, but our Regents reviews are packed. There's a lot of kids going to these and getting extra help. We have online platforms like albert.io that we use to help prepare for the Regents exams. So we, even as far as like newcomer E&L kids, obviously, so our E&L population, when I started there 20 years ago, we had about 60 E&L kids. We have about 350 E&L kids now. That's a big difference, right?
You know, let me asking, how big is your school?
Right now we're almost 2,000 kids.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to make that here 300 is a big number. So that's why I was just kind of here. I wanted to hear the second part to that. Sorry, go on.
So, and we decided to do a summer program for them. So for newcomers, they go to a summer program and they learn different skills, right? But they're also, let's say, brought to the public library. So they learn about a resource there and they learn how schools work, but they also learn literacy skills. And then we get them an art credit over the summer so that they get their art credit, their mandatory art credit out of the way so they can focus on all of the other things that are really important. And that builds then to being able to give them more supports during the day so that they can do better on their tests. As far as the AP, that has been an ongoing growth. And it started with, we started this VAP program in which, and this was years and years ago, when nobody had one-to-one devices really. And so those kids got a one-to-one device. There was training over the summer. They were identified, those kids were identified in 5th grade. So VAP started in 6th grade, and then they were tracked throughout high school to ensure that those kids identified in 5th grade as they're capable of doing AP courses later on. Were we right? And so we used a lot of data to track those kids. And then if you had that kid get into an AP course, you go, okay, why was that successful? And if they didn't go into an AP course, why? And what was interesting is many times we found that it was just the guidance counselor didn't recommend it. I mean, it's so simple, right? But if you have kids and our poverty rate, we are now at 50% poverty, right? And we weren't that high when I started. So the fact is that when we can increase our numbers in AP, the passing rates, mastery rates and all, yet we're increasing our E&L population and increasing poverty, something must be going on here that we're doing right. But it's looking at the data and seeing why are these kids succeeding? Why are these kids not succeeding? And what's getting in their way, right? So that's been helpful. And then it's just, again, a cultural shift with the AP exams of we changed, for example, in our social studies, we don't have honors anymore. You're either in a Regents, a regular course, or you're in an AP course, no honors. And the teachers went wild. They said, no, kids are not going to be able to do it. Kids are not going to be able to do it. Kids are not going to be able to do it. And our principal, luckily, said, yes, they can. And guess what they did? They did it. And so now about 50% of our kids that graduate about 50% of them have taken at least one AP course. So, you know, if you talk about like about 90% of our kids go to college, well, then 90% of our kids maybe should take an AP course because that's a college course and they're going to college, right? And research shows that if they take an AP course, even if they don't do well on the test, it's better preparing them for moving on. So those are just some of the ways we've changed it, but it's really cultural. It won't happen overnight. It cannot happen in a year. It's really coming up with this philosophy that kids can do this, kids can do this, kids can do this, and changing all that. And just that takes a lot of communication, meetings, meeting with chair people, meeting with parents, meeting with kids, meeting with staff, and then, of course, supporting those staff in that, right?
Really, it's from what I'm hearing from you is kind of that whole statement of slow is steady, steady is fast. You got to work your way, build it step by step, get everyone to get involved in it and get to understand it as you move forward. And I love the fact that your school got rid of honors classes and just said, they can do it. You just raise the bar. And though we always have individuals who will always say like, no, it can't be, it's not going to work. And you just go, yes, you can. And then it will. And then it happens because we will always find a way. We'll find a way to make it work. We might complain. We might kick the ground, do all that kind of stuff for a little bit, stomp our feet, but it'll always get done in the end. And it's just one of those things. I think it's great to hear that because that takes a lot to do. It takes a lot to be able to draw that line in the sand and say, we're going to do it. And we're just going to try it and see what happens. And we believe in you the same way you've got to now believe in the kids that they can do it too. And it changes that thought process right there and then.
And make sure, though, as an administrator, you support your staff through that journey because they're scared. They're worried. They're worried about those kids failing. So they have to know that there's a safe space, right, to do that work. And that was the challenge, right? They were scared. And then they were scared that they would be judged for their scores, which is legitimate, right? But we have really good teachers. So we knew they were going to do it. We didn't worry about them doing it. They worried about them doing it. So we knew they would.
Because you believe that they could. They may not have seen it in themselves yet. And to me, what I laugh most about that, and I want to say I laugh with it, is that's exactly what we do to kids. Kids don't believe that they can do half those things. And they need a teacher who's going to go and tell them, yes, you can. You can do it. Because once they have someone who can say that to you, and will work with you and support you, like you just said, they'll get it done. And I think that's where we see a lot of this always happens. And this is that I like to consider it's the mirror almost of exactly what we as educators will sometimes do, the exact same things our kids do, or what we're asking our kids to do. We are afraid because we think to ourselves, we can't do. So it's like when we raise the bar to them, we think, why can't they just do it? Like they need to do that. Like they can do it. It's like, well, when we raise the bar to you, how do you feel at that moment when that happens? You get scared too. Like we've got to go and believe the same exact way they have to believe. So I just think that's so interesting. I think it's great that that's how your school was able to look at that.
Yeah, we're proud. Oh, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
No, I'm just proud of the work that we've done because I've seen such a transition in the past 20 years there on so many different levels. And in summary, you know, we talked about AP exams and we talked about just everything. And then you talked about how did you do a collaborative environment and how did you do that? All of the positive change that's happened because we're purposeful. We have conversations with the right stakeholders. It takes time. We're willing to put in the work and the time. You know, we visit, like in 2 weeks, we're visiting churches on a Sunday so we can connect to people and that don't come to the school usually. Like you have to be willing to, if you want to see that growth, to just put the time and effort in, speak to everybody and just chip away and make sure communicate. It's communication. I mean, communicate. There were people who wanted to leave our district when I started. There were people who so many kids would go to private school because their parents didn't want to send their kid to our school. Now We have people moving into the district because they want to attend our school, because they know how amazing it is. And it is not cheap to live in our district. And so it's for those people listening that want to do this, just start, right? And just start communicating and know that it's going to take a long time.
Des, I know you had something to say.
I mean, it's taken us backwards a little bit, but I just like and I know I've made this point before, but so many of us chose education, even though we didn't necessarily plan to do this our entire life, but we chose it because we were good at it. And I think that it is important that we remember that our teachers, especially at the secondary level, but I believe it's true at the elementary level as well, but we chose to teach because we found a subject we really loved and something we were really good at, in an environment that we had been successful for a good portion of our lives, most of us, and we wanted to help others find that success. And so when what I've been doing for however long is challenged and I'm asked to do something and I don't feel that I can be immediately successful in doing that, it is a huge deal. And I have to remind myself every time I'm asking my teachers to try something different, or we're moving forward with this initiative, that I'm asking them to step out of a comfort zone. I'm asking them to stop doing something where they feel like they've been relatively successful and do this other thing that you may spend a period of time not being successful. And that is counterintuitive for so many people. I've never been bad at the things that I really wanted to do in my life. And now you're asking me to be bad for an unspecified period of time. And I just think we have to keep that in mind when we're having these conversations, because it is a mindset shift that we're working through as well. Scott, you talked about changing culture. I like to say that you don't change culture, you impact culture, and if you impact it long enough, it changes, right? So that was the piece I wanted to add.
Yeah, I agree with your statements about impacting culture, and I think that is true. I think that's one of the hardest parts about, I think, when it comes to education, specifically a large portion of educators, that they went into it because they did love it and they were good at it, and now they're being asked to do something they're not positive they will be good at, and it's a struggle to have. But again, I think it goes right back to that same statement of that's exactly what we're asking every kid to do. So we need to be willing to do it ourselves, because if we can't walk around in the mud our own selves, how are we going to ask the kids to do it? Yeah. So that's always the answer I always have when I talk with staff with that, when they're like, they're not sure and they're kind of feeling, it's like, we're telling kids to do this. How can we not be the same exact people doing it too? And it's okay. Like I always tell them all the time, I'm always like, raise your hand in this room if you've been put on a plan by me because you did something wrong. Like no one's got it on. I'm like, so then you don't have to worry about it. I know you're going to make mistakes the same way I am. Like we all make mistakes. We've got to work at something here. We've got to try first before we start saying we're not doing this. We have to give it a try, and we have to be willing to, because if we want the kids to do it, we've got to try it too. But I agree. I think your statement is absolutely correct with that. Well, an hour just flew by in that amount of time. So, Dr. Muller, thank you so much for coming out and being a part of this podcast today. Is there anything else you'd like to say for some final words?
No, this is fun. I'm glad you invited me to be a part of this experience. For those people out there listening, if you're not an administrator, if you're not an educator, please consider it, because it is a profession that gives back so much. And there's not many professions out there that can fill your cup as much as being an educator. The impact you make on a daily basis is amazing. It's hard work. It's emotional work. It's not as physically demanding, but it is emotional and mentally draining, but it is worth it and please consider it. And those administrators that are administrators, are, those people who are administrators already, keep doing what you're doing. Believe in yourself. And as people say, we're doing God's work, maybe. I don't know. So just keep going.
Agreed. Des, any words?
I mean, that was it. This is our calling, right? We got to step up. So absolutely. Thank you so much, Scott. I truly appreciate the conversation. And then Marco, take it on home.
And for those listening that aren't educators and you want to be one, please do. So this way I can prove Des wrong on that statement earlier that we are going to continue to get the people in. So I got to one-up him at least once in my life. So I'd rather just take that moment if I can. It's going to take me 50 years to prove it, but at least when it's all said and done, when we're in the retirement home, I can say I was right.
Now that's funny.
Again, Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. Des, as always, love having these conversations on Fridays. And I'm speaking for Des, but I know for Des and I, this is professional development for us. It's a great way to end on a Friday after a long week of work. Everyone across the nation is dealing with something inside their schools. For us to be able to always end it talking with great educators, administrators, people of all walks of life in education that we've gotten the opportunity to speak to so far, it's really been fun and it's been awesome and it's uplifting. It kind of helps you kind of send yourself into the weekend on a good conversation, feeling good about the things that we do here inside of schools. So thank you again so much for being a part of it today. With that, school's out.
You all will be missed. Until then, I gotta blow you a kiss. Until we meet again on that other side, this my rhyme. We all love you to the end of this time, always. Know this, you all will be missed. Until then, I gotta blow you a kiss. Until we meet again on that other side, this my rhyme. We all love you to the end of this time, always.